Uh, as Unitarians, we're a lot more susceptible to the truth. Let's just put it that way. We're a lot more susceptible to being righteous. Not that we will be, but Trinitarianism just blocks so many things. It's incredible. Uh, but I just want to talk about belief. What believing in Jesus really means in the wider context of that thought. So I'll just read a few scriptures from John chapter 3, verse 17, because you all know 16, so let's just start from 17. For God did not send the Son into the world to judge the world, but that the world might be saved through him. He who believes in him is not judged, but he who does not believe has been judged already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God, or the only Son of God. This is the judgment, or in the Good News translation, it will say, this is, what does it say? This is how the judgment works. That's what it says, the Good News translation. This is how the judgment works, that the light has come into the world, but men loved the darkness rather than the light, for their deeds were evil. Right? For everyone who does evil hates the light, and does not come to the light, for fear that his deeds will be exposed. But he who practices the truth comes to the light, so that his deeds may be manifested as having been carried out in God, or in agreement with God. So, what does it mean then to believe in Jesus? To believe in God's only Son? Well, knowing that he isn't God is, of course, a very good and important step. God's Son, being the second Adam, right? Being the last Adam, right? Means that he embodies the fullness of God completely, right? Everything that God wants a human to be, that's Jesus. That's what Jesus is, right? God's only Son. Everything that a human should be, and that God needs them, importantly, needs them to be. All his attributes, qualities, his justice, his conception of justice, what's right and wrong, is exactly the same as what God thinks right and wrong is. What God knows love to be, what God knows kindness to be. His morality, God's character in Jesus, right? God's spirit, right? So, do you believe in that? That's the question. Do you agree? It's important to say, do you agree? Do you agree with this character? That God has said, this is the character that I approve of. This is it. And now read about him, right? Now come to understand him. Do you agree with how God has made, or what God has made in this human, the image of the invisible God, and what he says? Because in the Old Testament, God hates idols. He hates images. He hates statues and images of crawling things and birds and insects and any sort of animal or any sort of beast. He hates all of that, the golden calf, right? He hates those things. But why? The reason is God has already made his image, right? You can't make another image, says God, because you, humans, perfect humans, Jesus, is that image. He is the image of the invisible God. There is no other image. God has said, look, this is my image. Don't make any other images. You're it. In other words, right? So it's simply that, do you agree with love, kindness, compassion, long-suffering, courage, self-control, selflessness? Do you agree with what it is to be a human according to God, right? Do you think this is what a human should be? And if you do agree with that, then you're in agreement with God. Then you believe in his Son. This is what belief in his Son is. Right? John 3:33. He who has received his testimony has set his seal to this, that God is true. And in 2 Corinthians 1:22, he has set his seal of ownership upon us and put his spirit in our hearts as a deposit, guaranteeing what is to come. And of course in Amos, Acts chapter 2, the prophecy that's fulfilled, right? When Jesus is raised and gives his spirit, right? That my spirit will be poured out on all flesh, right? And in John as well, we read that everyone will be taught by God, right? So that's happening now. People are making that decision. Either you believe in the Son of God or you do not. Now, whether they characterize that as being Jesus, love, kindness, compassion, long-suffering, courage, self-control, selflessness, whether they see that, or what a good human is, what a righteous person is, as being Jesus, that's what we have to do. That's the gospel. We have to tell them, this is who God has approved. This is the image, right? So, to believe in Jesus is to agree with righteousness, right? To agree with what God has created, his justice, his righteousness, his love. And if we agree, we must then also put on Christ, put on that character, conform to his image, the image of the invisible God. Otherwise, we'll be found out as hypocrites, right, and liars, and they have a place in the fire that's found in Revelation. So that's the important thing to understand regarding righteousness and truth, and that being a good person really does mean agreeing and believing in Jesus Christ, because he's the image. And some people are conforming to it, not even knowing that they're conforming to it. And I think it's our role to just tell people that who Jesus Christ really is, right? Who is truth, who is the way, and who is the life, right? It's very simple. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time. God bless.